Oh my god.
Well, there's probiotics. Not what I'm looking for, but...
There's a famous thing I never actually looked up. Chat, okay. It is an Amazon review. Apparently it ruins people's lives. I think it's like Hasbro gummy bears.
What it's the sugar-free gummy. Yeah, okay, hold on, let me get it up.
I've never actually looked at the reviews. Sugar-free.
You're gonna read it though.
Oh, well, of course.
I love these reviews. 26,000 people found this review helpful. Is that the one? I think that's the one. Oh my god, this is like a fucking novel. What? This is like 4 pages long now.
What happened to this person?
I feel so bad. This is a story.
Oh no.
No, this is wonderful. Go for it. I'm listening.
No. You first.
You want me to do it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'll do it. Hell holds no surprises for me anymore. This is a cautionary tale, and unlike many of the most reviews on this product, this is a true story, and its authenticity can be qualified by a small news item that appeared in the Toronto Star local news section during the month of April in 2013. Much to my chagrin. I would consider myself a prudent man, not given to bouts of outspokenness or craving attention, and certainly not one to rock the boat. On any given day, I can be found reading a crime novel on a park bench in the middle of the city, soaking in the opulence of nature while nibbling on my tuna fish sandwiches and fending off the voracious seagulls and squirrels that threaten to spoil my repose. This is me, law-abiding and introspective, which is why it came as a shock to me to find myself incarcerated because of the devil's confectionery, Satan's sweet meat, Lucifer's lozenges, the horror that is known as Haribo sugar-free gummy bears. I'll set the scene. It was late winter, early spring in Toronto, and the city had just been digging itself out of a late-season snowstorm. I was heading to the Pearson International Airport for a red-eye flight to Amsterdam in order to give the Dutch arm of our company some training on the new software that had been installed. I'm deliberately being vague to prevent my place of work from being linked in any way to the incident that occurred. I had finished packing, checking the time, and found I was running late by my flight. It was 7:10, and now it was almost 5. Cursing softly, I ran out to the car and threw my bags in the trunk, hitting the gas a little harder than usual in my haste to make the long-term parking lot as soon as possible. Luckily, traffic was light on the 401, and I made it to the airport in record time, but knew that my chances of making my flight were still at risk if I didn't use my time wisely. I hadn't eaten lunch since, and I was feeling a bit hungry, my stomach rumbling loudly in protestation, which caused me to look around at the other travelers rushing past me in a busy terminal, mortified that my bodily noises might be heard by others. I briskly checked my watch and decided that I had enough time to grab a quick snack before going through the baggage check and security. I would get something more substantial once I was checked through security. I spotted a vending machine, nestled in a relatively low-traffic corner of the terminal, and rushed over, already pulling out my credit card and mentally assessing what I had a craving for, so as to save time interacting with the machine. My eyes scanned the wonderful, colorful array of confection quickly, coming to rest on a tantalizing, rainbow-colored bag of gummy bears. Fuck. With the simple white and red logo, Haribo, emblazoned across the bag, in what appeared to be a slightly tweaked Helvetica rounded font. Now, I'd pause here in the story for a moment to underscore the importance of making proper food choices. I was hungry. When you're hungry, you should eat food. Food is defined as a nutritious substance that people consume to maintain life. This is what food is. These days, the definition of the word food has been bastardized, and the meaning has been broadened to include veritably any material that can be digested or rather chewed and swallowed without causing death or severe illness. Haribo sugar-free gummy bears are not food. They aren't even from this planet. I imagine their origins have been conceived in a boardroom of hell by a top team of creative pain administrators with senior-level demons rubbing their hands together in ghoulish delight as the Hell's chief chemist slowly lifts the veil on their new creation. The way I figured it, I was taking a bit of a holiday from life so I could relax and fastidiously regimented daily schedule a little to allow for some frivolity. After all, I was going to be in Amsterdam come morning with 16 hours to kill. I had to be training the Dutch employees. Maybe I would take a trip down to one of the coffee shops in the red light district and really let my hair down. No, I wouldn't do that. I would see the area of the city from the bus as I went to the hotel. I would eat at the hotel and drink sparkling water. So I better enjoy these gummy bears, my one extravagance to commemorate my break from my routine. I joined the queue in the KLM line. That's an airline, by the way, which was mercifully short. Most likely because all of the passengers from my flight had already been checked in through as the flight was scheduled to depart in an hour. I checked my watch again, frowned, and absent-mindedly opened the bag of Haribo sugar-free gummy bears and began to munch on them in line as it slowly advanced. To be fair, they tasted fine, just like every other manufacturer's brand of the colorful candy, and they were sugar-free to boot. This is what made the whole incident that followed so baffling. If they had tasted off or different, I most likely wouldn't have continued to shovel them in my mouth absent-mindedly while daydreaming about what I would order to eat from the room service in my hotel in Amsterdam. As I gave the attendant my e-ticket and she weighed my bags, the first of the pains began in my stomach. I thought nothing of it at first, chalking it up to the fact that I needed something more substantial than gummy worms to tackle my hunger. But over the course of the next 5 minutes, the shooting pain began to come in more rapid succession. At this point, I had my boarding pass printed, and rubbing my stomach a little, I proceeded to security. I briefly entertained the thought of trying to find a restroom before going through security, but at that point, my discomfort was manageable. I didn't think it would get any worse. Certainly not within the amount of time it would take to clear security. I joined the line and started fishing for my passport to present the agent checking tickets. I felt a thin sheen of sweat break out on my forehead and underarms. My features flushed for a moment. As a wave of heat washed over me, I didn't pay it much heed, as going through security always caused me great anxiety, and I chalked it up to pre-flight jitters. It was only as I stood face to face with the agent and handed her my passport and ticket that I had a glimpse of the agony that I was about to endure. It felt like time rippled for a moment, as if my consciousness buckled, so intense was the pain that fired through my bowels. I grimaced spastically and emitted a low moan. I felt myself take an involuntary step sideways. Stars shot through my head briefly and my vision blurred. I snapped back into focus. The agent was staring at me with slight consternation. I was asked if I was all right. I pulled myself together, stood up straight, and declared I was fine, mortified that I had a lapse of decorum not only in public, but at the security clearance at an airport. As I fumbled off my belt to go through the metal detector, the pain in my stomach increased, and practically I had to sit on the floor to take off my shoes, terrified of what would happen if I bent at the middle to do it. It was becoming increasingly more evident to me that this wasn't just a stomachache, no. This was something much worse. As a child, I had had a bout of diarrhea on my trip to Mexico with my family. I remember the feeling of nausea that swept through me before my child self had surrendered to the gas pains and parked myself on the toilet for an hour, shitting until I felt I didn't have any bones left. And that was how I was feeling now, with several key differences. The pain was worse. The sense of impending bowel movement was so formidable, it gave me temporary amnesia. And it took all of my willpower, all of it, to clench my butt cheeks together to prevent my sphincter from exploding. A sudden shock of pain racked my body, and I had wondered if I was going to give birth to a Tasmanian devil, the crazy, fever-induced image of said cartoon animal chasing Bugs Bunny through a splashy volcanic shit kettle. That was my stomach, causing me to elicit a short, maniacal bark of laughter as I approached the metal detector, a wild, distant look in my eye, sweat now beginning to pour off me, like a long-distance runner. The security agent on the other side of the detector shot a quick glance over to her co-worker and narrowed his eyes. He made a subtle movement towards his holster. My breathing became uneven as I entered the metal detector, and I realized, with alarm, that I had taken off my socks without even registering it, and one of my shirt tails was untucked at the front. I held my breath, my eyes bulging dangerously from the head of the machine that scanned me. As I shakily moved towards the agent for a pat-down, my stomach began to elicit sounds that I can only describe as otherworldly. It started off as a soft bubbling, heard from afar, and grew in pitch and intensity at an alarming rate. My jaw dropped in shock as what I can only describe as the sound of an agonized wailing alley cat in heat, with a persistent Doppler effect added to its voice, emitted from some nether region of my intestines. The officer's eyes widened in alarm, and she kept her eyes glued to my stomach as she thoroughly patted me down. As she reached my shins, I felt my innards suddenly expand and plummet towards my rectum. With cat-like reflexes, I squeezed my sphincter shut with what seemed like nanoseconds to spare, and I knew that if I didn't get to the bathroom immediately, I would shit myself. With a Herculean effort and all the strength that I could muster, I forced my butt cheeks together, knowing that one false move would open the floodgates. I began to walk like a duck, trying to remain as inconspicuous as possible, not even caring what other people were seeing in front of me. A disheveled, barefoot 40-year-old businessman, red-faced, bulgy-eyed, sweating profusely, shaking slightly, and walking without bending his knees. With single-minded intensity, I grabbed my carry-on, shoes, and socks from the plastic tub, and I turned on my heels, with the intention of finding the nearest restroom and slowly dying there. Oh, one squirt at a time. But that's not what happened. I turned to go and found myself staring at 3 armed agents who stopped me and asked if I would follow them. Why, what's the matter? I stammered, wincing slightly as the act of speech seemed to strain the tenuous and extremely fragile truce I had negotiated between my bowels and the tempest that raged within. I have to go to the bathroom right now, I pleaded. Just follow us, please, they said, leaving no room for argument. The other travelers clearing the security check stared with curiosity and revulsion at the spectacle unfolding before them, whispering amongst themselves and hurrying to pack up their belongings and get as far away from me as possible. No doubt assuming that the airport had nabbed some sort of domestic terrorist. If I hadn't been feverishly trying to hold back the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, I likely would have died of shame. With each step I took towards the room that ushered me into, I felt that my legs would give way. I marveled at how strong the human will could be. Marveled at what was essentially patching a hole in the Hoover Dam with bubble gum. Maybe I wouldn't make it through this ordeal at all. The room they brought me to was an examination room. I had pretty much stopped registering details of my environment as my consciousness slowly began to close off. All but the absolute necessary functions, breathing, ability to walk. But I snapped back to reality. Oops, there goes gravity. When I heard the snap of rubber. The slow dawning of the realization poking through my agony and stoic resolve as I turned to the agent donning rubber gloves. So we are going to perform a cavity search on you. A young, fresh-faced agent stated in a firm but emotionless voice. His short-cropped blonde hair was immaculate, and for a crazy moment I wondered if he was an actor. This was all some sort of elaborate practical joke done to amuse bored kids watching YouTube. He must have taken my tortured silence for resistance, because he had looked at me sharply and said, "Lower your pants and underwear, please," and face the desk. Panic started to grip me in its icy grip, and the sudden adrenaline threatened to destroy my sphincter's bulwark and rend my anus in two. I inhaled sharply, and with pain, I doubled in my efforts to clench my cheeks together. "Sir, please, I begged, deferring to this kid in an act of desperation. "I have to go to the bathroom. You can follow me into the stall if you need to, but I had some bad Haribo sugar-free gummy bears, and now I feel like..." But they had stopped listening. They smirked at each other. 2 of the agents, a tall, dark-haired female and a shorter, balding fat man, looked away from me. I could see them shaking a little as they stifled their laughs. "Sir, face the wall. Put your hands on the desk and spread your cheeks," the young agent stated, a lopsided grin on his face. But I began to protest, and a fresh shock of pain forced me to stop. Oh, God. And lean on the table for support as an ungodly howling rose from my stomach, something between the dying moans of a woolly mammoth and the sound of bubble wrap popping underwater. I exhaled shakily, and my focus began to narrow as I rallied for the final battle. shaking uncontrollably and sweat literally raining down onto the table in front of me. I turned to face the wall and heard a meek, childlike voice pleading from somewhere in the room. Please, it said, and then again, please. From somewhere within me, my mind recognized that this sound had issued from me. Although my consciousness had now begun to separate from my body, and I held my breath and prayed to God for strength. It probably has heroin or something up there that opened up, the female guard said, as part of me that hadn't escaped into the yet unknowledgeable was behind me to my left. Probably high as a kite. Look at him, she said. The shorter guard agreed with a snort off to my right. Spread your cheeks, the young agent said, his voice directly behind me and lower than the other two, and bend over. Please God, please God, please God, please God, I whispered in a desperate maniacal mantra, not even aware of my surroundings anymore. I felt like I was lost in an opium fog with half-snatched images and sounds filtering through to create a nonsensical version of reality. Another volley of pain tore through me, and I was involuntarily leaned forward over my desk. My focus completely narrowed now to a spot on the wall, 2 feet in front of me. A curious imperfection in the wall that seemed to be a whitewashed stone. It was a dark blotch about 5 millimeters long and shaped like a smiling bear. A yellow, dancing bear. No, a green bear. No, red. It was all the colors of the rainbow. My God, it was beautiful. It just took something as simple as a light breeze to trigger Armageddon. That's all. No trumpets. No fanfare. No fire raining from the heavens. No dogs and cats living together in harmony. No finger on the button. No prophet to predict it. No nothing. As I stared at the rainbow bear smiling and dancing in front of me, my mouth agape, drooling, eyes glazed and bloodshot, face covered in a sheen of sweat, I heard the softest sound, an exhalation from the young agent behind me. And then at the same instant, the warm air of his breath feathered across my butt cheeks. For just a moment, maybe less, maybe a split second, even a nanosecond, I felt the presence of God there with me in that room. Neurons began to misfire at a blinding rate. Nerve endings bristled and muscles twitched reflexively. I stood on the brink with 1 foot hovering over the edge, and then without taking a step, I found myself plummeting. With a sound like an extra-large plastic ketchup bottle being run over by a Mack truck, my sphincter released. The pressure of the blast pushed me hard into the desk, and the legs of the desk screeched as they scraped across the floor. My body remained rigid for a moment, and I experienced a relief that I could only be described as orgasmic in its purity. My eyes rolled in the back of my head, and my tongue lolled out of my head like I was a half-dumb dog. I emitted a low, sustained groan that grew in pitch as the filthy torrent pushed its way out of my body. Tremors racked my body, and I must have looked like a fish out of water, with the endless stream of shit firing out of my ass. Other sounds and sensations started to filter now as my consciousness began to materialize once more. The muffled scream of a dungeon filled with prisoners to death radiated from my stomach. The rushing sounds of liters of liquid trying to escape through an aperture too small to accommodate it all at the same time. The omnipresent sound of chunky liquid spattering against a hard surface with great force. The high-pitched screaming of a woman's voice calling out to God. Another voice, sobbing uncontrollably, imploring to make it stop. And my own ecstatic, monotone wail. When my ordeal had finally run its course, I was left panting for breath and wobbly-legged, half crying, half laughing with relief, barely lucid, and feeling as if I had birthed an elephant. My colon felt like someone had poured chili sauce all over it, and then sent in a colony of fire ants to eat it. Through my sobs, I heard the sound of dripping, like when the sprinklers are eventually turned off after an office fire, or after a thunderstorm, when the willow that overhangs a pond continues to rain down long after the sky has stopped. From behind me, the sobbing continued, and I heard someone trying to speak into a walkie-talkie, but nonsensical words were all the man could speak, like the ravings of a lunatic. With great relief, I slowly pulled myself off the table, legs trembling, my stomach eliciting one last sound, a long, prolonged gas bubble that eerily resembled a pig orgasm. I slowly turned my head to survey the devastation, and in that instant, if I had a pencil or some other sharp object, I would have gouged my eyes out in revulsion. And the smell was enough to drive a man insane. It was the stench of rotting potatoes mixed with sulfur and ammonia, cooked in a broth of chicken feces and left to age 2 weeks in a yeasty stew at the bottom of a French outhouse. After half a whiff of this ghoulish brine, I immediately stopped breathing through my nose. But the taste was to remain in the back of my throat for months to come. The young agent had taken the brunt of my foul witch's brew. And at first, I couldn't process what I was seeing. I thought somehow the young blonde kid had been spirited away and replaced by a brown golem or an ATV rider that had spent the better part of the day driving through every mud puddle he could find after a torrential downpour. With some degree of compartmentalization, I came to understand that for some unfathomable reason, this kid hadn't moved, or hadn't been able to move, through the entire fecal deluge. He had weathered the entire assault head-on, like some sort of hero from Greek mythology. I had given this poor schmuck a one-man shit bukkake that would make a Brazilian pornographer retch with disgust. And he was still in the same position he must have been in from the moment of first impact. I tried to comprehend how he must be feeling, what he must be going through psychologically, but it became evidently very quickly that he had become very broken. No doubt forced so deeply within himself once the fire hose had been turned on that there was little to no hope of him ever coming back from it. Certainly not without extensive psychotherapy or a lobotomy. I looked beyond his quivering catatonic crouched form to see a perfect outline of him, cut out on the white wall behind him. Either side filled with a dripping opaque layer of alternately pulpy and runny fecal stew. I noticed 2 quivering masses at either extremes of the room and realized they were humanoid in form. Although the caterwauling that was coming from these broken creatures was just blubbering gibberish, and this was the tableau that was burnt into my eyes for eternity. Needless to say, I missed my flight. In fact, the next week was a blur. I have vague recollections of an army of hazmat-clad figures looming over the brown landscape of the soiled room, the slopping sounds of rubber boats squelching in puddles and fetid detritus, uncontrollable wailing and animal-like sounds issuing from the mouths of creatures that had been traumatized beyond their capacity for being put back together. A complete loss of sensation from my waist down as I was rolled through the room on a waterproof gurney, its wheels struggling to surf on top of the shit-soaked floor. I spent a week or so in hospital, enclosed in a well-ventilated, sealed room with suited doctors coming in on the hour to monitor my vital signs as they tried to rehydrate my body. I had apparently expelled every available drop of water from my body that was possible to sustain life without for a short period of time. All of my clothes were incinerated in the hospital's crematorium, and a soiled bag of Haribo sugar-free gummy bears was never recovered. This is my story. It is inconceivable to think that this kind of product can be sold legally and misrepresented as food. I was lucky. I survived. But as for the family of the survivors and the survivors themselves, they will forever live with the trauma of the events that took place at Pearson International Airport on that snowy day in April 2013. And scene. You're welcome.
Sir, this is a Wendy's.
I heard that and I spit up all over my pants, all over my pants and my feet.
Holy shit.
Chair.
Oh my god. I hope all 1,800 of you enjoyed that. That was free. You gonna be okay?
My nose is drooling. What the fuck?
Oh, fantastic.
My eyes are
Yes. Score. We did it, chat. We did it. You and me. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I'm here all night. Thank you. Thank you.